Hey guys, welcome to our first official podcast, Beyond the Roar. I'm Kendall Lampman,
I'm
I'm
Tryniti Diaz.
Coral. I'm Coral Detwiller.
I'm Jahveya Davis.
I'm Ali Christensen.
and today we're going to be discussing the modern life of an NFL player, with Dakota Randall as our guest speaker. But before we get in with Dakota Randall, we're just going to talk about our own opinions on social media and how that impacts journalism, reporting, and yeah, and how just it has that big impact on it. From personal experience, I work with Association for Women in Sports Media and the Tiger. And when I go to an event and I start reporting and I'm getting everything in from the game and I write a recap after or an article about it, I just don't go to like the one source. I know I have to go to my Instagram, then I have to go to my Twitter, then I have to go to my LinkedIn. It's just like we can't just network on one individual platform because in order to make those connections, you just have to get your name out there and do this and do that. And if you have an article written, then there has to also be a recap added to that. And then if there's an article, then you have to add your own individual twist on things. And so I just feel like social media has definitely broadened reporting and sports and everything along with it, but it also it just adds to the work of the reporter.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think with like the younger demographic of sports fans, they're less likely to read an article that might be a couple pages long, and they're more likely to gravitate towards like short snippets of information. And obviously, I'm sure like you guys all agree. I know for me, I get a lot of information from social media, whether it's like Instagram or TikTok, where it's like 10 seconds of news. And I think that sports reporters these days, they can't only rely on posting long articles or long recordings. They have to like cater to the audience. And I think that posting on social media is like a really important part of that.
Yeah, I think going off of that, like something that's super big in sports journalism is like kind of making sure that you're like evolving with like social media evolving and like there's just the generation around you. Because like let's say I graduated school like 5 years ago, like journalism and sports or journalism in general is gonna be way different now because everything's evolving like social media platforms. So I think when it comes to sports journalism, you want to make sure that you're always growing and trying to figure out like the best way to always like stick out to bring out like the best content to your audience.
Right, I agree with that as well. Like me personally, whenever I go, like I have specific accounts that I follow on TikTok that give me my like news broken down for like someone in my demographic, like as a young woman. Um, like I feel like a lot of people are more adjusting to like things that they like to follow instead of just like a big broad like sports channel. Like I get, yeah, I guess we have ESPN and they're great and all, but like sometimes we want things that are like more like geared towards that are marketed more towards us. So I think that like that comes into play as well.
I agree. Like, I also I don't really know much about the field. Like, I don't have any like firsthand experience, but I know like even just like in our first day of class, like a lot of people I feel like didn't even know like much to say about like what platform they watch. Like, I feel like everyone's just kind of broad, like, oh, I watch ESPN or I watch this, but there wasn't like anything specific because I feel like if we were to all have answered that more honestly, it would have been more like TikTok, Instagram, like that's where we're just seeing everything quickly. And I feel like that's what a lot of like information is turning into today is just stuff on like social media and less of like ESPN and all those big networks.
Also, something about Javea brought up how we all go onto our platforms and kind of go towards more people, like individuals like us. And honestly, social media is how I got interested in like sports reporting or broadcasting or my actual career field that I want to go into. Like Katie Feeney, like she is like the it girl, like for Penn State and everything. And now she works for ESPN, and I just see that and I'm like, wow, like that's literally my ideal of what I want to do. And she is on every single social media platform known to mankind, I feel like. And I just I follow all of that. And yeah, it's just she's a great influence, I feel like, as a role model to this industry and what reporters and journalism can do.
Well, today, we're gonna start off with our podcast called Beyond the Roar, and I'm gonna introduce my guest. My name is Jahveya Davis.
I'm Coral Detwiller.
I'm Ali Christensen.
I'm Tryniti Diaz.
And I'm Kendall Lampman.
All right, perfect. And for our guest today, we have Dakota Randall. To start off, his notable stories is Keyshawn Beyond Trolls, ESPN Talking, heads after the Patriots beat the Texans. Some of the major events he covered is the playoff games during the later years of the Patriots dynasty, the Super Bowl championships, NFL analysis with the organizational changes and coaching transitions. He has experience in covering the Patriots in the NFL. So to start off, we kind of want to hear about like your story and beginning and how you got interested. So you give us a quick rundown of everything on that.
Yeah, well, so off the top, I don't work in sports media full time anymore. It's been about a year since then. I do it on a part-time basis now, but I mean, this is kind of part of the larger conversation, I guess, surrounding the industry, but I last year transitioned into communications, corporate communications and marketing. I work at a college in Rhode Island. But I still do work as sort of a managing editor and quality control and sometimes writer for Nesson, which is the broadcasting arm of the Boston Red Sox and Boston Bruins, but also has a website, and that's where I've done a lot of my work. But yeah, I grew up in New Hampshire, and when I went to college, I originally was pursuing English teaching, and then somewhere along the line, I sort of remembered that growing up as a little kid, I always wanted to get into sports reporting, so I sort of recommitted and applied to Boston University's graduate school, got my master's, and had a couple jobs sort of during that time. I worked as a correspondent at the Boston Globe to go to various sporting events around the city. Was the sports editor for the school's news service. But then I got my internship with Nesson in like 2016, I want to say it was. Um, and I sort of capitalized on that. And at the end of it, they gave me a full-time job offer. But at the time, they didn't have any openings on their actual sports desk. They had started a new brand called Nesson Fuel, which was racing, but also like car culture, which I'm not really into. And this is kind of part of the one of the main things that maybe we can talk about is being willing to go outside of your comfort zone and cover stuff that you don't understand. And so I had to do that for a while, just covering NASCAR, going to races, learning about cars. Again, something I didn't care about. But then after a couple years, they transitioned me over to the sports side. I did that for a few years, and then during COVID, they offered me the Patriots reporting job, which was kind of the crown jewel job at the company. And yeah, I did that for like 4 or 5 years, and that was amazing. It was, travel flying around to all the games and practices nationally and internationally at the stadium every single day, in the locker room every day, meeting the players and interviewing them every day, doing TV hits, podcast hits, radio hits, all that kind of stuff. And then I did that until 2024, went to a different company called Pro Football Network for a year, continued covering the Patriots. But then, like I said, last spring, I changed careers. But now I still do the same thing that I did for Nesson on a part-time basis as a side hustle to pay for daycare.
Mm. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense with the daycare. Okay. Great story. Great story. That's interesting. You're not really interested in NASCAR because like it's a cool field. I'm
No,
interested.
I do. I came to love it. And that's one of the things that, anybody who wants to get into the industry, you should be open to covering things you're not used to, not just because it is good for your resume and it's a good way to just sort of gain the skills like trial by fire. Like, if you can be, I was plopped into a state championship field hockey game knowing absolutely nothing about field hockey, and I figured it out and made a deadline for the Boston Globe. And if you can figure that out in that moment, then you sure as hell can go to something easy like an NFL game and do a good
Right.
job. But also you kind of can potentially become a fan of those sports. And so yeah, I became a fan of NASCAR. I think if you are a reporter, it's one of the best things you can cover because the access is unprecedented. You basically can go anywhere, do anything you want, hang in the garage with the drivers. There's really nothing like it from a sports reporting access standpoint. But
Right.
it's
Yeah.
an interesting sport. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so we're gonna dive into some of the topics that we're planning on hitting today, which is journalism and how social media and AI has kind of shifted broadcasting and yeah, so now we're gonna pass it off to our first question.
Okay. So, first of all, thanks so much for being on this again. But I think like to start off, a lot of people are really interested in like how AI is affecting the job and like I know you were just saying that you started when it wasn't as big of a thing and like now you're working part-time where AI is like really starting to grow. Like how has that like influenced sports media and like what you do?
It's a lot. It's on some level, it can be a positive in terms of it can be a good tool to just be a sort of juiced up version of Google, right? Which, you're using that kind of stuff to do research all the time, and you can use it in that way, and it can be very beneficial. But really, what's going on more than anything is it's become something that's sort of helping to facilitate job loss in the industry, right? Because and not to say nothing of the of people who use it to write their entire story and then submit it because they're working for a website that doesn't really have standards and it's sometimes run overseas and they just want articles that'll get quick clicks and so they sort of hire these like 18-year-old kids who will just use ChatGPT and so that's a problem. Like that happens a lot. It happens at some outlets that are you would think would be above it, like Sports Illustrated got caught a few years ago, having writers that were just doing ChatGPT content. Um, but ultimately, one of the biggest re issues that is presenting is, at the end of the day, any sort of news outlet you work for, the goal is to make money, obviously. It's a business. And, when you're in sports journalism, it's nice to go do the sort of feature enterprise report where you interview someone over weeks or you develop sources or you do a lot of research and come up with something great. And that's nice, and that's what you should want to do. But also the reality is what pays the bills for most of these places, and enables them to still allow the writers to do the things that they really want to do. Are sort of these quick hitting stories, whether it's like just a basic news thing, such and such suffered an injury. Here's the latest. Here's the trade rumor. Here's the result of the game. And unfortunately, that kind of content is super easily done by AI, right? Whether that be someone using ChatGPT or whether that be the news outlet itself, just sort of looping in whatever AI service to pump out just a bunch of generic game content or generic news stories really, really fast. That'll generate a lot of clicks really fast and generate revenue for free, right? They're not paying any staff to do that. And so again, it's because that those kind of stories are the ones that make them the easiest money. And so they're outsourcing a lot of that stuff to AI. And then the human people that they hire are usually, at least the trend right now, is on a part-time freelance basis. Um, Hopefully that pendulum swings back to a more full-time, but unfortunately right now that is one of the crises facing people that are getting into the field is how do I find full-time work? Because most places are just doing freelance and part-time right now and outsourcing a lot of other stuff to AI. So it's pretty complicated. It's kind of dire, but I am hopeful that everything will sort of settle back in a comfy middle point at some point. But right now it's a little tough.
Right. And with that, like, do you see how, like, would AI have, like, a, would it help it in that sense
It
instead of hurt
can.
it?
Yeah, I mean, it can. I just think it depends, right? Like you see a
Mhm.
lot of like AI generated videos right now, right? Or you see a lot of these, you'll open up your Instagram and you'll see a lot of bogus sort of graphics that have like a quote or it's just meant to be sensationalism or something that'll make, people gawk at it on social media. And sometimes it's made by a person, a lot of times it's someone who goes into Gemini or
Mhm.
ChatGPT and says, make me a graphic of Drake May saying something about something. And a lot of times it's not even real. And then they put it on Facebook and it generates engagement and which generates engagement revenue. Um, and so that's more often than not what it's being used for right now, unfortunately. I suppose down the road, um, you'll be able to use it more as a tool, to maybe sort of make your video content a little bit better. I'm sure there's ways to use it as an editing tool to
Right.
really, smooth out some of the rougher edges. But as far as like just using it to create the thing you want to put out there, um, I wouldn't recommend it because a lot of editors and people who are hiring for jobs, they can snuff it out pretty quickly and they just won't be interested.
Right.
Definitely. And we've noticed that going to the player aspect and you being a reporter, we've noticed that many players are announcing news themselves on social media. And how does that affect your role as a reporter and getting that news out fast?
Yeah, it's honestly it is kind of helpful. I mean, it's unfortunate in the sense that, part of how the way people used to stand out is if you could become the reporter that could get that information behind the scenes on just on the record or as an exclusive and get it out there yourself, and you're the only one that had it, right? Um, nowadays players are announcing stuff like you said, or the team might even announce like a signing, or the agency, or whatever it may be. And so it takes away that part of the process of finding a way to stand out. But on the other end of it, like, you know, especially if you're getting into writing, you got to be willing to do high volume, a lot of stories quickly, and reacting to stuff as soon as it happens. And so players creating the stuff that's story worthy on their own, um, it ends up helping because again, most websites now they want sort of that quick hitting stuff that'll pay the bills. And if a player goes on social media and calls out the refs, right? Like let's just say they go on Twitter and they yell about something, the refs, it's easily a story you can write in 10 minutes and that'll make a decent amount of money. And so it helps from that standpoint. But the downside again is that they've sort of taken it upon themselves to do what we used to do, which so we just all have to adapt.
I
Yeah,
think
that's really interesting. I had a question building off of that, and it was how are you able to balance like speed versus accuracy and the quality of writing that you produce when you're breaking stories, especially when nowadays like people are able to get information out so quick. How are you able to differentiate yourself and still have accurate writing while posting up-to-date content?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those single most important things because I mean, anyone who's in this field has done it where you've tried to be too quick and you got something wrong. Sometimes it's a big deal, sometimes it's something minor, like that's not a big deal. But ultimately, like the juice isn't worth the squeeze on one story to just go as fast as possible. Like it's whatever sort of click revenue you get from it, it's not important enough to sacrifice like your reputation if you put something out that looks really bad or is incorrect. So you just kind of have to just take your time and slow down. And I know that that's kind of hard in today's sort of fast food culture, but you gotta just slow down and make sure everything's right. But another, one way to do it is let's say the, let's say right now we found out that Drake May suffered an injury on the way to the stadium and he's not going to play. Like you got to get that up really fast. You got to open up your computer, go as quickly as you can to get that thing up. But the reality is everybody's doing that. Everybody's doing that story. So it's not that you're not going to get that much revenue from it. It's not like anyone's going to be like, wow, did you see that story that Dakota wrote on Drake May suffering an injury? It was the same story 50 other people wrote. The way you want to stand out is get that thing up quickly, relatively speaking, and then take your time to find an angle. Like you always want to spin the news another way that has you stand out. So what is your take on it? What is your reaction? Try to come up with something that people might not be thinking of. That way you can turn news that everybody's doing into something unique to yourself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely.
And then kind of going off of what you said, Dakota, I know like quality is way like bigger in this industry than quantity. So I was like wondering what's your preparedness and like how do you like stay like authentic to yourself when you're preparing to like report or anything for like your like past career like the NFL and stuff?
Yeah, I think one of the single most important things that anybody getting into this line of work should do is to find their voice. And you don't just like log onto the computer, Google, how do I find my own voice and start doing it, right? Like you just kind of practice a little bit. And so what I just always try to do, was sort of be myself in everything that I did. Sometimes, yeah, you write a little bit like a robot. Like there are some things you're just going to write like a bland news story. But in anything else, I just tried to do it my way, like write in my style with a little bit of humor and references to whether it be like pop culture movies. Like I try to take on a sort of personality in my reporting where I didn't take things too seriously. Or if there was a big controversy, like legally or something, I always try to be the person that wasn't overly reactionary or rushed to judge. I try to play things right down the middle and fair on both sides. Because unfortunately, it seems like not a lot of people do that right now. They just rush to get the most sensational headline up that they can and feed off of the controversy, right? So I just tried to sort of make my brand being, fair, to be as entertaining and sort of fun as possible without ever sacrificing fairness, accuracy, or just being informative. Um, but some people, right? Some people like their whole brand is just being antagonistic, right? Like Dan Shaughnessy, who's a famous columnist for the Boston Globe, and he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame as a columnist. His like entire personality and voice is just kind of being an antagonistic prick, right? Like that's what he's done, and he's made an amazing career out of it. It's just not the way I would do it. Um, but so he found his voice early on in the 60s and 70s, and he leaned into it for 50 years. And so I'd recommend to anybody, whether you're doing podcasting, video, TV, writing, like figure out what your style is and lean into it entirely, and don't be shy about it because otherwise you're just not gonna stand out or give anyone a reason to hire you other than just being in the right place at the right time, right? You want to force the issue a little bit and being interesting and different, but not just for the sake of being interesting and different, but just because everybody is. Every person is unique and interesting in their own way. You just got to figure out what it is that makes you that way and lean into it when you do your work.
That's
Um,
interesting.
like jumping, like kind of going back, like I know you, like even like we talked about in class too, like you have to learn how to juggle like not just writing one paper, like multiple different things. Like, how do you think like we should go about like people coming in learning to juggle all that stuff? Like, is it as hard as it sounds when you're thinking like, oh, I have to do this, this, and this, or do you kind of like figure it out and like it kind of just flows?
Yeah, I mean, it's like any job, right? Like you can get in the weeds on any job, and be flustered. Like growing up, I growing up in, Wolfboro, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I did two jobs a day for a while where I would wake up and go do landscaping from like 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then I'd get out and I'd go wait tables until midnight. And in both of those jobs, some days you have days where you literally have no tables or there's no grass to cut because it rained the night before. Some days you just have an insane amount to do and you can get really flustered. You just got to sort of slow down and take it one project at a time because you literally cannot accomplish all of them at once. Like you can't wait 10 tables at the same time. You got to do one, go to the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so with writing for me, or when I would cover like a Patriots game day, it wasn't just writing. Like I was thinking ahead to like I got to get on the field after locker room availability and do a video hit for TV. And then I got to get back up in the broadcast booth and I got to write like five stories. Um, and so like during the middle of the game, you can start to stress yourself out thinking like, okay, it's 5 p.m. Locker room's going to take 2 hours. It's free. It's snowing outside. I got to set up the camera. I got to go upstairs and do this. Then I got to get an Uber back to the hotel and fall asleep at a reasonable time where I can sleep before the flight. And if you start thinking ahead, you're just going to stress yourself out. Because you can't slow down time, right? So all you can do is slow yourself down, and just and take things one as they come. But I mean, I remember one time, I don't know if any of you guys are Patriots fans, but there was an infamous game in Las Vegas where they had like the most bizarre, catastrophic ending uh, of any game that I've ever seen. And in that moment, I was like, I'm going to be in the stadium until midnight writing about this. Like, this is going to suck. But you just sort of make peace with it in the moment, and handle it and slow down and do one thing at a time. Because otherwise, if you're trying to rush through all of them, your work's going to be bad, right? And that's not what anybody wants.
The,
But it's
the
also not
Patriots
rocket
are
science. That's the other thing. It's none of it's rocket science. Like it's not like you're trying to go to Mars. It's talking about the sport that you just watched. So at the end of the day, it's only so difficult, right? You just gotta breathe.
I feel like you have to be like super in the moment with it too. Like if you're thinking ahead, you wouldn't be in the moment with it and like really taking in everything you're like around.
Well, that's another part of it, right? Is you don't want to be like, for the sports part of it, you don't want to be buried in your laptop when you're in the press box because you'll miss things. Um, and you do want to sort of take time to smell the roses and look around. Otherwise, what's the point of you being watching the game in person anyway? You might as well just be on your couch and blog, watching it on TV. So if you're going to cover things in person, whether that's sports or anything, you do have to slow down and sort of take things in so you can observe stuff, um, to make your work that much better.
Right.
Patriots were obviously under a microscope for a long time. What was it like covering the Patriots with being under such a high pressure and like champion expectation era? And how did that environment shape you and all as like a reporter?
Well, it's funny. I unfortunately covered the Patriots in like the worst stretch for them. At the beginning of my career is when they were still like Belichick and Brady were both there, and it was like, heightened stress, heightened intensity all the time. But then over the last few years, they were terrible, right? And that makes it difficult, right? Because it's easy to go into a locker room with 60 guys and ask them questions when they've won 10 games in a row and they're winning championships and everything's great. It's a lot harder to go in when they're 2 and 12 and none of them want to be there and they sure as hell don't want to talk to you. And you got to try and like forge a relationship with them. Get them to answer questions. You got to find unique angles, right? Because at that point in the season, a lot of the fans aren't reading anything. They're like, why would they want to read about this team at this point? So it's harder, right? Like if you're a reporter that's been covering the Cleveland Browns your whole life, like hats off to them, right? Because like, what do you write about, right? It's got to be so difficult. Um, and also, but the other thing about that is, as teams get better or worse, the their communications and public relations staffs change too. So when the Patriots were great, it was really easy for those communication staffs and PR people to kind of be like a Gestapo, right? And like really sort of like intimidate you into like they couldn't tell you what to write, but there was a level of fear, right, that you were going to make Belichick mad or his sort of people that worked under him. And you really had to sort of play the game. Whereas once they were terrible, all of a sudden the coaches and the PR staff are inviting the reporters for mixers and off the record things where we're having dinner and drinks with the coaches and everything's all go lucky and easy because they want it at that point they need to have a good relationship with us, because they need people to come cover them and paint them in or try and get some positives out of it. So it's interesting. It just all the job from all aspects sort of, rides the roller coaster with the team based on how they're doing.
Thank you so much. That was really insightful, actually. I liked hearing about that.
Okay, yeah, okay. So we're kind of in our last couple minutes. So kind of getting on a personal approach, like, um, when you came into the industry, like, picking the sports media industry, who is someone that you looked up to, and like, what skills, like, what do you admire about them the most, and like, so yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. When I was at Boston University, my mentor was this guy, Kevin Paul DuPont, he used to be the New York Rangers reporter for the New York Times, but he's been the Boston Bruins beat reporter for the Globe for decades at this point, and has had a long running column in there. And he was when I was at the Globe and at BU trying to find my real job, like at Nesson. Um, Not only was he just like incredibly helpful in building connections, trying to set me up with jobs, but just as someone who I could bounce my work off of. And that's one thing I would stress to anybody trying to get in this, whether you're doing writing, TV, whatever, is find someone you respect and send your work over and
Right.
ask for hard feedback, right? Like you find someone who, because like your work is not good, neither is mine, right? At that, like it's just not going to be like you're going to need to make a lot of improvements, and you're not going to make them unless someone's honest with you. Like I remember when I started at Ness and when I was doing the NASCAR thing, my boss was brutal. Like he would call me across the office and sit me down and go through, we called them back reads, like all the edits in person, and everyone can hear them. And I was like embarrassing. And it was every story was over and over again. But years later, some of the younger employees started complaining about it because it like hurt their feelings. And so he had to sort of stop being so blunt and honest, but then the quality of the work on the website got a lot worse. So, it's hard, right? It's hard having someone tell you like this is a mess, but you need someone to do that. And so he was that for me, right? I sent him all my stuff and he's like, the bones of this are really good, but this is all over the place, right? Um, but he also was someone that I aspired to be because like, you know, his writing was so good that I would like read it and I was like, I can't figure out how to do that. Like I can't figure out how to like, just arrange sentences that way with those kind of words and have it like sound as cool as it does. It's like being a basketball player and you think you're really good, but then you watch like LeBron James or someone and you're like, I don't get it.
Mhm.
Like, how did he think about that in that spot? Like, I just can't even wrap my mind around it. Um, so yeah, if you're going into this line of work, try and find a mentor or just someone who you can connect with, both to sort of emulate them and sort of learn things from, but who will also be honest with you and give you good feedback.
Right. That's great to have someone you can look up to. And honesty is key, I feel like, in a field like this, because people are criticizing every little thing that you're doing.
Well, one thing you shouldn't do is search for that on on
Well,
Twitter,
yeah,
social
true.
media. That's the last place you should look because I
Right.
don't know if I've ever seen any a single bit of constructive feedback on Twitter. So that's the last place to go.
Right.
I
All
feel
right.
like in the industry, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable to get to that higher standpoint.
Well, sorry, what did you say?
Oh, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable in this industry. I feel like
Oh
getting
yeah.
that hard criticized feedback and doing sports that you don't usually do. You just have to dive into it and
But no,
everything.
I was just gonna say that when you talked about that earlier, Dakota, that really like stood out to me because I've heard that from like multiple like people in the industry. Like you have to be open because you're not gonna just like walk in and get a job at like ESPN and be like, yeah, I'm doing football. Like you have to want to be able to do any type of sport like that you can think of, and like if you're not willing to do that, like it's probably not the best industry for you.
Yeah, 100%. Like you have to be willing to get uncomfortable both in terms of the subject matter, but also in the stuff that you're doing. Like it's nerve-wracking to like I covered I had to go cover a PGA event in Boston, a golf event, and just because not because it was any what I wrote was special or anything, it's often just timing, but it was like the front page story on the Globe Sports section, right? And I was like nervous. I'm like, I'm uncomfortable. I don't know anything about golf, and now my stupid golf story is on the cover of the Globe. Like I was kind of freaking out. Or like when if you're doing a TV hit for the first time, whether it's live or not. Like nobody just does that for the first time and just is not uncomfortable. And it's just totally cool. Like you're probably weird if you do step into that for the first time and you just have no nerves, right? But the only way to get better is to do it over and over again and get reps. Or
Mhm.
else you're just going to be nervous every time you do it, because it'll be like, oh, I haven't done this in like a month or so, and you're nervous all over again. Like just keep practicing. And if you're not able to get the reps through a job, like if you're like, well, I want to get good at doing video hits, but I don't have no one's hiring me, well, practice them on your own, right?
Mhm.
And make them on your own. And then maybe if you get confident enough with what you're doing, make a YouTube channel or put them on your Instagram or something. And then that way, when you do get a job that requires you to do that stuff, you're like, look, I'm already really good at this and I'm comfortable doing it. I'm not gonna, if you have me go to this thing and appear on camera, I'm not gonna, freak out and melt down. I'm gonna do a good job. So as much as you can, just practice so that, you get those jitters out of the way and become more comfortable with whatever you're doing.
Yeah, no. I think being comfortable in an industry like this is like you have to be prepared. 'Cause you never know. But we're gonna wrap up today with Coda Randall. But before we wrap up, is there anything that you wish fans understood about what reporters do behind the scenes?
Um, I would say that it's not some like lavish lifestyle that uh like number one, I can't get you tickets. So, don't like all my family, friends, whatever, they're always like, "Oh, hey, can you give me tickets to the Patriots game?" I'm like, "That's not how this works." If the Patriots gave me tickets, I'd get fired because it's super unethical, right? Um, but beyond that, it's not like we're flying first class and staying in like Ritz-Carltons and everything. Maybe the thing is, it was kind of like that 40 years ago, right? Because the reporters flew on the team planes and there was a ton of money in the industry. So maybe it was a real lavish lifestyle. But these days, it's a grind because you got to do so much more work than you ever used to. It used to be the Globe columnist would write 2 stories a week max. These days, I mean, I was doing like 50 stories a week in essence, plus multiple podcast hits and TV hits and everything. And it's a grind, right? You're tired. The hours are tough, especially if you're covering something like baseball, where you're like it's 162 games and they're all at night, right? And it's tough on your family, right? Like if you've got wife, kids, whatever, and you spend time away from them, like it's hard. Um, but the payoff is great, right? Like you get to see some amazing things that a lot of people don't get to see. You get to have some really unique experiences. And then if you continue at it and suffer through some of those harder, more demanding times, eventually you will get a job that is a bit cushier where you can relax a little bit. And it all sort of pays off in the end. But at the beginning, like it's like any other industry, when you get an entry level job, it's not going to be sexy and it's going to be really tough. So don't look at your person who's just like, oh, they get to go cover the Patriots, they get to cover this, like, oh, I'm so jealous. Like, yeah, it is amazing, but it's also really hard work. So people trying to get into the industry should know what they're signing up for because it's hard.
Right. Yeah, no, and I feel that with your friends trying to get tickets and everything, it's definitely annoying. But yeah, no, that work definitely comes in handy when coming into an industry like this. Well, Dakota, it was great hearing from you today and hearing about your story and the shift in broadcasting and media. Again, I'm Jahveya Davis.
I'm Coral Detwiller.
I'm Ali Christensen.
I'm Tryniti Diaz.
And I'm Kendall Lampman.
All right, and this was Beyond the Floor. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming on,
you so
Dakota. We really
much.
appreciate it.
All right, thanks
Thank
for having
you.
me, guys.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Yep.
Thank you.